There was a time in the deep past of the history of Illustrator, back in the 80s and the 90s, before the invention of electricity, where we wouldn't have thought much about using Illustrator as a vehicle to do anything on the World Wide Web. Well, it's a different world back then. But you've got things like native, scalable vector graphics, a lot of things that are going on. And today, Illustrator is a very important tool in the design and construction of a website. But the intent of your document should be known up front, because if we're designing for the web, there are certain things we should set up to make the job go easier for us. So go up to the word File on the pull-down menu and go down to New. In New, we could give this one a name. Let's do that this time. Let's give this a name. Andy's web page. The name as you put it in here really doesn't have much to do with the name as it exists as a web page, so go ahead and use what you want. We need to go into Profile right here and change this to Web. And when we do, a lot of our work is going to be taken care of for us. For example, down here we have a size of 960 by 560. Now what is that? If we click here, there are several kind of defaults. 960 by 560 is considered by the World Wide Web Consortium the ideal size for a web page if the average monitor is 1024 by 768. That's why that number is there. If we want to change it, it used to be actually not 960 by 560. It actually used to be 955 by 600. And if you want to change that, go ahead. You will notice our units are in pixels, which makes absolute sense when working on the internet. You wouldn't measure in anything else. We are going into a landscape mode or a portrait mode right down here. You can see those two numbers and notice how it jumps up here. So we want to make sure our width is 955 by 600. You do not have to bleed anything on a web page. It's all going to be there. I'm not even sure why they have that option if you're on the web, but don't use it. Down here under Advanced, now by default this would be collapsed up, but if you open that up, your color mode is RGB, red, green, and blue. Again, that's a default. You need to work in RGB if you're working on PowerPoint presentations, websites, anything like that. Our raster effect is rastered down to the default of anything that's defined as a monitor, which is 72. That's perfect. Your preview mode, we'll leave that at default. This option is on. Align new objects to pixel grid. That's a good one to leave on when you're working on the web for this reason. It will force the objects to align to the pixel grid. That really does help prevent pixelation when the objects get viewed on the website itself. That's about it. We can come down, click OK, and we have a blank canvas, tabula rasa, an area where we can design the basic bones and structure of a web page. Now, suggestion on workflow for this, if you're working Adobe products, the next stage for something like this, once you've got it done, this is not a class on web design, you could then move what you did here into something like Adobe Dreamweaver or even Flash and continue the process toward web. Now, one more thing. If I press Command R, which is just a shortcut to pick up our rulers, you can see that the rulers are measuring in pixels. If I come up and right-click my mouse, we can change that. Now, that wouldn't make sense, but understand your rulers will always be measuring in what you set up the document to measure in. Well, that's about it. We're ready to work on a web page. Go for it. On to the next.